I'm currently locked down here in Zanzibar. And how this came to be, there's a short, it's always nice to open a session with I prefer a story than a joke, so a small story. In terms of, in supply chain and procurement, we're always taught about negotiation and about value. So there's a small story I have in terms of how I came to be where I am currently. Years ago, there was a negotiation between Coca-Cola and the Southwest Airlines. Now, Coca-Cola was a large supplier to Southwest, and they were seeking a significant increase in the price of their beverage. So Southwest had a certain budget, and they were struggling to concede to these requests. So they went away for a small outside session just to really discuss what could they offer Coca-Cola, a value. So this is a question of, it's more than price. So they were thinking, what a value could we offer Coke that's highly valuable to them? So in the end, what happened was they entered the room, and then they discussed with Coke that they have a proposal, and that as opposed to accepting the price increase, what they could offer Coca-Cola would be to have napkins branded as Coca-Cola on every seat of the aircraft. And because that's a value to Coca-Cola, right? The brand recognition. And luckily and happily, Coca-Cola accepted because they realized the value in that. So having said that, I'm currently here in Zanzibar at a hotel called Emerson Harumzi, and I've been able to negotiate to present this webinar in a beautiful room here, a beautiful hotel, in return for me doing the needful, which is just promoting to everyone here, if you do come to Zanzibar, Emerson Harumzi is a beautiful hotel, and they'd welcome you, and I'm sure we could negotiate a discount as well. But anyway, it's a small procurement story, because even when I ran my procurement team at EY, we used to have a little game about negotiating. We'd negotiate anything we could. We would go and hire a car, and we'd challenge one of the team with negotiating an upgrade. Because at Avis, they tell you that everyone's an owner, so we would position them as the owner to make that decision. So again, Caribou, looking forward to this session. As Ben and Rose have indicated, there will be a number of topics that we'll discuss. One will be this getting to the C-suite and what's required to be in the C-suite. This isn't really about knocking off the CEO. This is more about adding value and what's required really to be part of that executive team. Another discussion, and you'll see it in the presentation, is under the theme of COVID-19 response, but just what are some of the responses that companies can undertake? And at Lumen, we are supporting a number of actually COVID initiatives right now. I mean, Zanzibar is supporting one, and mainland here in Tanzania supporting another that's really looking at, in some cases, savings, and in some cases, making things safer for COVID. So paperless being a big theme for some of our clients, as far as how do they make the work environment safer? How do they make it safer for their employees? How do they make it safer for their customers? And so there's quite a few activities and initiatives underway right now for COVID response. But the predominant one, of course, is creating value, both top line and through supply chain, how we can create top line value, and bottom line, savings and cash, working capital. So those will be some of the topics. So I look forward to, I guess, more than even presenting, the dialogue and exchange that we'll have as we go on. So Rose, do I tick share screen now? Is that what I need to do?
Yes, Mark, you are the host now.
Okay. Bear with me here. Okay. Now, is that working?
No, not yet. Click on share screen.
Okay, I think we're there.
Coming on now. So you can put the full.
Yes. Okay. And so, yeah, what you'll see in the photo is actually almost that time right now, 6:20 in Zanzibar. So it is sunset, and that is one of the typical views here. So just a little bit on myself. I say a little bit, and I know the slide looks a bit overwhelming, but currently working in East Africa, the managing partner of Lumen Associates, East Africa. Background, I have an engineering degree in metallurgical engineering and an MBA from the University of Michigan. Operations management was the focus. Previous roles have been managing partner of PwC East Africa, based in Nairobi, but looking after 5 countries and about 140 consultants. Ernst & Young, I was a lead partner for the UK procurement practice, and then the US. I then moved back to the US with my accent clearly to be the managing partner of the procurement practice. 9 years with Booz Allen and Hamilton Strategy Consulting, that was at one point acquired by PwC. And I've also served 2 industry roles. One was the Senior Vice President of Supply Chain for PolyOne Corporation. PolyOne Corporation is a multi-billion-dollar polymer company, a chemical polymer company with operations around the world. And Kpis. Kpis is one of the largest compressor companies in the world, air compressor. And there was Executive Vice President of Sourcing and Logistics. And you can see the over my 30 years, as Bernard indicated, a variety of companies that I've worked with, cross industry, cross sector, and I think what's been interesting for me is really the privilege to have worked with some of these companies and to share with them the experience of the issues that they were facing. Some of the issues were clearly problematic, and in some cases opportunities. I've worked in the US, the UK, Europe, China, East Africa, South America. So for large companies, but equally for small companies. There are quite a few Kenyans, I think, on this call. So I have worked with the Nairobi Hospital. There's a very small clinic called Brother Andre Medical Clinic. It's a maternity hospital that I worked with also in Nairobi. A small malaria institute that you'll see on the slide, Ifakara Health Institute, in here in mainland Tanzania. Telkom Kenya, Umeme, and I've had quite a coming to East Africa experience working with energy companies. Here I'm working with ZECO in Zanzibar, Zanzibar Electricity Corporation. I've worked with Umeme in Uganda, with KPLC, and some advice to TANESCO. So in Africa, really focused on some of the key themes of Africa. If we get into, I think, Lumen and why Lumen, and we'll just go into, Lumen is the East African management consulting firm, and we focus on organizational effectiveness, operational efficiency. The main areas are around developing and deploying capacity development, people, process, technology, and creating results, outcomes, and results. And how this came about was, I was on secondment from the UK, PwC UK to East Africa. And when the secondment came to an end, I could have gone back to the UK and there, served as a partner, really serving clients with the objective of really making more money, improving profitability. And here I saw in East Africa, it was an attractive market. It was an attractive market it's growing. It was very attractive for market entry, but also the themes were more meaningful in terms of the types of work to do here. Currently, as I said, working on electrification, solar, renewables, electrification of as small as some islets off Pemba, putting in place a 30 megawatt solar plant here on Zanzibar and procuring the requirements there, working with the Port of Dar es Salaam to improve efficiencies there as they continue their growth. And the port is critical. Effective port is critical to any economy and the infrastructure, both import and export. Healthcare, working with hospitals and healthcare, which are critical. Agriculture. So it's been, to me, much more rewarding. So I decided, given the network that I had, given the access to people. I think if you look at the people we have at Lumen, we hire a number of Big Four consultants, ex-PwC. I think Judith Rovers is on the call. She's part of our team. I think some of our other team members may be on, but we have a variety of people who are experienced, ex-Big Four consulting, strategy consulting, or key roles with multinationals, where we can give both a perspective and when we stick to a lot of our tenets in terms of fact-based, objective, teaming with our clients, and walking the journey with them. So that's how Lumen came about. And so we are incorporated in both Nairobi and in Tanzania. And we are going into year 2, and thankfully have had a very good first year. So that's Lumen in a nutshell. But we also work through partners, and these partners are quite important because you know, we talked about supply chain and supply chain partners, but even in what we do, one of the key areas that we focus on is Lean Six Sigma, and we'll get into some detail on Lean Six Sigma as far as value creation. That's one of the areas that we'll profile on this webinar. But Lean Six Sigma, we have a masterclass black belt. If anyone, I don't, Rose, can we ask, you know, by show of in the chats or something, just if people have experience in Lean Six Sigma, if we have any black belts or green belts, or to what extent, if people can just let Rose know, that would be interesting to know on the call. But that's one of the areas we find there's a lot of value, in particular in East Africa. Quite a few companies are adopting it for a variety of reasons. Esri is a global leader in GIS technology, and GIS is Geographical Information System. And GIS is proving quite powerful in terms of supply chain, knowing, you know, being able to visualize your supply chain, visualizing where your assets are. And we have quite a few opportunities right now where we are marrying supply chain technologies with GIS technology in both maintenance and service, field service, to know where your assets are, where your customers are, and customer service. And so we'll get into that, but Esri is one of our partners that we go to market with as far as technology enablement. TIFA's based in Kenya. Some of you may know or heard of Maggie Herrera. Maggie is the managing director of TIFA. And for strategic services, we often team with TIFA when we need to do our market research, when we need to do our strategy work. But TIFA has a very strong capability in the area of market research. So we partner with TIFA, and we've partnered with them in Tanzania to do some studies here that have been very well received. Gallup, so Judith Rovers is on the call, and Gallup is strength-based coaching. So strength-based coaching is it's not necessarily a new technique, but it's an approach that focuses on strength-based, strength being positive, as opposed to normally when in a lot of companies, when you go through your personal development, there's a focus on weaknesses. What Gallup allows you to do, they have a framework for coaching that allows you to really profile yourself in terms of your strengths and how to maximize your strengths. But at the same time, how do you protect your weaknesses? And one of these are the themes we'll get into as far as getting to the CEO suite, or the C-suite, in terms of, you know, that self-awareness, the self-awareness of strengths and weaknesses. And so at Lumen, we have 2 of the only 6 certified coaches in East Africa, and the only 2 here in Tanzania. And if there are any questions we'll have on this as we go through, Judith Rovers is on the call, and she's one of the 2 who are certified. Then we get into technology. DoubleClick is one of our partners in East Africa. They focus on, they're an IT solution provider. So with them, we do process automation. We will focus on workflow through SAP, app development. So all of these skills, all of these capabilities of our partners allow us to really have a solution, a full service solution for our clients. So that's a lot about Lumen. Our services, and as we get through the services, we'll take a deep dive into our supply chain services with a particular angle on COVID-19 and COVID response. So overall, we focus on, we have a procurement, supply chain, performance improvement through operations, supply chain, cost reduction, digital solutions, business process automation, mobile solutions, SMS solutions, and GIS solutions. Strategy services from strategic planning, market research, management KPIs, and then performance coaching. And performance coaching is a lot around, we talked about the Gallup certified strength-based coaching. We're currently doing this for a large client in terms of one of the executive teams, and individually as well as collectively, because as a team, the more that teams understand each other and they're vulnerable to each other in terms of their strengths and their lesser strengths or weaknesses, it allows for more effective teaming. So increasingly, we're seeing an interest in performance coaching and the Gallup certified coaching. One of our current transformations is a supply chain transformation, and we've married together sort of a traditional supply chain transformation where we're going through supply chain initiatives, but at the same time, for the team to work effectively, we are marrying in the Gallup strength-based coaching with the team, because it's only people who are going to execute these strategies, and the more effective they work together and know each other, the stronger they are, and the more sustainable these solutions. And lastly, our HR services. So HR services, your traditional organizational reviews, change management, talent development. So you can see through these services, we offer a wide range of services through our associates. But if we get into sort of the meat of the discussion today, one is COVID-19 response and what tools, techniques, clients can do. Because right now, the way Bernard, even in our discussions, coming out of this, there's going to be a requirement for cash, for cost savings, for revenue. Cash is king, as Bernard puts it. And so there will be a requirement to have short-term plans, and I'm sure a lot of people out there are putting in place short-term plans, medium-term plans. I avoid the word long-term because I really don't believe there is there really is a long-term. There's a short-term and a medium-term. And a lot of these, you'll see what I call the wheel of fortune here. As we look at these value creation techniques for procurement and supply chain, some are very short-term, and some are much more sustainable and long-term. But let me just take some time and just walk around this circle and give some examples of what we mean. So short-term opportunities one can find through, for example, marketing spend. I don't know how many of you out there are looking at the marketing spend, but if we look at the demand management, we've got demand management and specification management. In the very short term, what we would look at is opportunities for example, in the marketing spend and other overhead type expenditures. Demand management, where, for example, at Aviva, a large UK insurance company, there we scoured through the marketing spend and the overhead spend. And here we looked at things like the mobile expenditures, software, licenses. We looked at event management. There's a lot of money spent on event management, and here it's not necessarily well spent. So we actually went through and did zero-based budgeting, and we looked at what's needed, because in some cases there were software subscriptions that were no longer needed, or they were oversized, or they weren't optimal. It's like, sometimes you'll realize you'll get a phone call from your mobile company provider, and they'll actually walk through with you where you're overspending and money. So demand management is an opportunity to almost revisit demand management from ground zero and ask the question, what do we actually need? Supply-based restructuring. Supply-based restructuring, this is, in the short term, you'll be able to renegotiate contracts. So this is, supply-based restructuring is much more around fundamentally looking at your supply base and looking at, what is optimal for our organization. This gets into topics such as insourcing and outsourcing. So when I was at Kpis, we completely turned our value chain upside down from our supply base. We outsourced operations that were non-core. We insourced things that were strategic. We looked at global sourcing, and I'd say a leveraged global sourcing where we had managed risk across the globe. So we didn't put all of our eggs in one basket. We would go, yes, we did go to China. We went to Brazil. It sounds like the COVID journey, I know, but we looked and sourced and cost advantaged countries with a risk plan in place. And that was a lot of supply-based restructuring. And that of course, when you talk about outsourcing and insourcing, there are a lot of issues that you'd run into as far as labor, unions, looking for incentives in various countries. So supply-based restructuring is not necessarily a short-term activity. When we get into supplier relationship management is where you might find some shorter-term opportunities. If I look at a pharmaceutical life science company called AstraZeneca. Here, the marketing department wanted more money. The CFO decided if you want more money, you need to find it in your expenditures. So this was a program that was put in place where 50% of the savings went back to the marketing department and 50% went to the bottom line, which therefore incentivized the stakeholders to undertake it. And this was an initiative where we went out to really look at the cost drivers and cost structure and the processes across that chain to understand where we could take value out, where there was waste, the cost, event management. There was a lot of traveling done. There was a lot of hotels that were booked, a lot of venues that were booked, a lot of meals, etc. Planning was quite important, and planning wasn't done well. So we found that through working with the event management companies, we found some win-win solutions for quick savings. Another one here is what I call could cost or should cost. Should cost is where you can collaboratively work with your suppliers, key suppliers, to understand based on cost drivers, based on material cost, based on labor cost, based on logistics, etc. But it is opening the kimono and really understanding what the cost structure are, where there's shared cost, and how you take those out. And so this is one we were working with an electronics company and really understanding their supply chain. Logistics, there were areas where we weren't shipping effectively. There were material costs where we had overspec'd and could take cost out. So in this area, we actually found some short-term opportunities, policy changes around some of the requirements that were placed on the supplier by the customer to drive value. When we talk about value-added partnerships, the interesting one here is that we talk about innovation, right? And how do you drive innovation? And this is top-line opportunities through value-added relationships. One example, and you see it today whenever you drive a car and you look in your rearview mirror. There was a time when BMW was struggling to, every X years, every few years, there's a facelift on vehicles. Right? They go through and they won't fundamentally change the car, but they'll go through a facelift and add new features. But BMW was struggling from a budget standpoint, so they reached out to some of their suppliers, and one in particular was headlamps. And what they realized was that through a partnership, they could actually differentiate BMWs based on headlamps. And so this was the first time, if you remember those, the first differentiation on headlamps was that small ring, and you knew behind you based on that small ring that you see in the headlamp, it was a BMW. Now everyone's taken that, you see some very funky headlight designs out there because it became a differentiator. And this was a partnership with the headlamp supplier. And the target here was how do we differentiate ourselves and make it a recognizable brand. And so that's how all of these crazy headlamps took off years ago. There's another one. When I was the head of procurement at supply chain at Poly1, one of the businesses was looking for revenue enhancement. So Poly1 made polymers. And so we reached out to our suppliers to see what innovations they had that we could go to market with. And one supplier came in with an idea of plasticized wood. So this was a wood manufacturer. And we realized that plasticized wood offers many properties better than basic wood, particularly for external applications. So with the plasticized wood, that was a product that was jointly created and went to market, and it was a win-win because the wood manufacturer was able to, the wood supplier, able to sell wood, we're able to sell polymers. And it was an innovative offering that we went to market with jointly. So that's, I mean, some examples of value-added partnerships. We get into process effectiveness and compliance. And this is, I think there was an earlier webinar where there was a topic discussed around AP, or a lot of us will know the P2P, the procurement to pay process. And a lot of the inefficiencies in the P2P are around policies, or around systems, or around manual paperwork. And there's a big initiative in a number of companies to achieve much more efficient back office processes. Back office processes where people can be liberated to either do higher value added jobs, or an attrition plan in place for retirement. And so there's again opportunities through process effectiveness and better compliance. A fun one here is that we look at is total cost management. Total cost management, because it really does look at all the trade-offs and of the costs that are incurred across the supply chain. So there's a pen company, AT Cross. AT Cross, very successful next to Mont Blanc, or up against Mont Blanc, as they might put it. They make not pens, but they're called quality writing instruments. I would insult Cross if they knew I used the word pen. They're quality writing instruments. And their supply chain is complex. The brass shells are made in the US. They're then shipped to China. There's manufacturing and value added done in China. Then in China, they're packaged up and then shipped around the world. Well, Cross recognized that they had three big issues. One was their inventory was very high. So they realized that they had a lot of stock outages. So they had the wrong product in the wrong place at the wrong price. And they had a very long supply chain, because these products that were then manufactured in China were then shipped by sea around the world. So this is one where we really got into a lot of detail around working capital, inventory, supplier costs, and we really looked to decompose their supply chain, whereby we ended up finding solutions where they needed to have a more responsive supply chain and a faster supply chain. So what we found was that a lot of these products were packaged in China. And if anyone bought a pen, pens come in these large boxes, voluminous boxes. So these products, and that's the final SKU. The final stock keeping unit is a pen in a box, or multiple pens in a box. Well, even in market, if what we found was that in retail stores, some of the sales assistants were actually taking pens out of the box and repackaging them. So what we found was, from a total cost standpoint, it cost less to put the pens on flats, just multiple flats, package them so that they were flat and and not as voluminous as one pen in a box. We could then air freight them. So they would arrive in 2, 3, 4 days around the planet instead of 4 or 6 weeks. So we would actually reduce the inventory, have a much more responsive supply chain, lower logistics cost. I know, flying probably isn't as friendly for the environment, but even here it was more efficient than the large boxes that they ended up air freighting on the emergencies. So we reduced the emergency shipping, cut the inventory, actually cut the logistics cost, and got product to the right place at the right time. And even for the sales assistants, they would have the products in a flat, and then we locally source the boxes. So these boxes then, at the counter, a lot of people decide, we don't even want a box. I'll just have my pen, please. So it allowed to really focus on what the customer wanted, and optimizing local packaging as opposed to packaging in China and putting it on a boat and shipping these large volumes packages around the world. So when we talk about total cost, that's an example of total cost. The last one, we'll go back around to specification optimization. And this is it's a longer term opportunity, but these are where, what I find in having worked in supply chain for a significant amount of time, I can take more cost out of a design than I'll ever negotiate out, right? So you'll tweak 5-10% in negotiation. Every now and then you'll find 20. I found 50% where things got really, there were just something wrong with the pricing. But typically you can negotiate 5-10%. When you look at specifications, here's where you're taking out a lot of money, and ideally you want to and this is one of the procurement challenges. We'll get into measurement, but if I can help design a product that costs less at the launch, I can go to market with a lower cost product. But supply chain is measured on savings. So that's one of the disincentives here, right? In terms of, do I let products get introduced that I can then cost reduce? And I've seen this happen. I've seen, vehicle manufacturers where, procurement looks at these designs and like, okay, let's get to work now and let's take cost down. As opposed to getting in the beginning and working with engineering to take a higher margin, lower cost product to market. So specification optimization. This is, for example, Heinz. I worked with Heinz for 3 years on packaging, and we called it should cost or could cost. So an area we looked at specifically was cans, tin-plated cans. And what we found on cans was the tin plating. Tin is expensive, and the tin plating, the cost had gone up significantly over time. We looked across our portfolio of cans and found that the coating specification is called GSM, or grams per square meter. The grams per square meter varied significantly across the same application of a can. So baked beans, for example, some of the cans may have a high inside and outside tin plating, inside being a higher spec to outside because you have direct contact with the product. But we found that for historical reasons, some of these specifications were much higher and therefore much more costly. We looked at the iconic Heinz ketchup bottle, and we looked at how can we should cost, or we end up calling things right weighting instead of light weighting, right weighting them. We looked at corrugated packaging. So packaging was one where there were short-term opportunities where in some cases we actually did find, we call it parametric pricing, but basically you look at cost per square meter or cost per kilo or cost, you can actually benchmark pricing across if you get all the prices for your product and you look for anomalies. And we found some anomalies where the cost per square meter of material was extremely high. And that was an area to identify quick hits. So the specification management allows you to find quick hits when you do find these anomalies, but it also allows you to go to market with more competitive pricing. But one of supply chain's challenges to, in its scorecard, somehow alter the scorecard so that cost avoidance gets counted. And it's not just always a cost savings. So that's, all these opportunities here are valid, but against each of them, there will probably be challenges to deal with. So I thought I'd spend some time just going around this wheel of fortune and just describing more than just the terms themselves, but just showing that there are real opportunities, and I've tried to cover different industries, so a lot of people out there can find some applicability on what we call supply side cost drivers and demand side cost drivers. But I think in these COVID times, there I think are some very strong savings plans, value creation plans, because we're talking about revenue, we're talking about cash and inventory that can be put together walking around this wheel. So that's a bit of a deep dive. Now I guess, Ben, as you called it, the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room was supply chain wants a seat at the table. And so be careful what you ask for is my first comment, and what do you really want? Because in reality, it's not so much a seat at the table. It is being a key contributor to the business and working on the direction and the strategy of a business. And so what I've done is I've really put together some thoughts I have in terms of, I have worked with, I've sat across from CEOs, I've worked with a number of supply chain executives. But the first perspective here is, and this is what everyone's heard, supply chain needs to add value, right? Because supply chain is the conduit, the interface between suppliers and the businesses. And so this is really left to right. You start with the business and focus on the business needs, right? And the question is, how can supply chain harness the collective powers of the supply base to allow your businesses to achieve their commercial ambition, right? So, teaming with these businesses is important. Understanding what their needs are is important. And then once you understand what their needs are, you can then define the requirements and remuneration with suppliers. So how do you want, what are the requirements? Who are the best suppliers to satisfy this? And what type of remuneration or contract agreements, partnerships are required to deliver it? And then in return, the suppliers will provide goods, services, innovation, which we could call supply chain value, procurement value, back to the businesses. So the business is a starting point, and I know a lot of people are thinking in reality the customer is a starting point, the customer, and working with the businesses for procurement and supply chain to really understand the customer needs, and to the business, and to the supply chain to provide value. So I think having worked for some time with, I find some of the most talented supply chain executives, there's kind of 6 characteristics I've recognized across these supply chain executives who do sit at the table. And again, I'll provide some examples, so these just aren't words. So, we say create a shared vision, and I think everybody's heard of a shared vision. But what does that really mean, creating a shared business with your business partners? So years ago, I was the head of supply chain at PolyOne Corporation. As I said, PolyOne was a global multi-billion-dollar polymer company. And I went in as head of supply chain and thought, okay, let's chase some savings. Let's see what kind of savings we can give these businesses. And one of the things I realized was, and this is again one of the things you need to do that's sort of subtle, is get to know your business owners, right? Don't assume. Get to know their businesses, spend time with them. I actually assigned one of my supply chain managers to each business unit to sit on their management team. I spent time with each of these, the vice president of these businesses, to really understand what their needs were. Because in reality, instead of savings, I had one business owner who needed titanium dioxide. There was a shortage in the market, and he came to me and said, I don't need savings. I need access to titanium dioxide in the market. I can price my product however I need to price it, but I need TiO2. So I'd like to work with you and your team to find access to supply. And therefore we put in place partnerships and otherwise with TiO2 suppliers. Another one of my business partners needed, if anybody knows polymers, you can buy virgin polymers, which is directly manufactured, or you can buy post-producer or post-consumer. Post-producer is, for example, Procter & Gamble make nappies, right? When they make nappies, they're using the diapers, nappies, but they're using first produced polymers. And if we could get that polymer back, the scrap, the wastage, we would know exactly what material we're getting back. So that's post-producer. Secondary was when you can go out in the market and then you're finding scrap and you're not quite sure the quality. So they needed post-producer polymer because it was lower cost and would help him lower his cost. Another business needed innovation, and this is where we came with the plasticized wood. Another one needed a more responsive supply chain. And so here we looked at local sourcing, or at least consignment inventory, or local suppliers or local warehousing. But we looked at solutions so that the inventory, if they were coming from a few global sources, was available so that they could be more responsive. And then one business needed cost savings. So here we went all out and found cost savings. But we talk about a shared vision. I'll come back to that. It's really working with your business partners, understanding what business they're in, understanding their strategy, understanding what they need from supply chain, and then structuring a program to deliver that to the business partners, because not everybody needs cost savings. Not everyone needs working capital cost reduction. They're understanding what they need to be successful. The next one is to be willing, ready, and able to take end-to-end responsibility of the supply chain. And so no matter where you land, there's an expression, land and expand, but no matter where you land, it's looking across the supply chain and understanding, what value is there in having a cohesive supply chain. So right now I've got 2 clients. One, as of July 1st, as of a couple of days ago, he's now responsible for stores, warehousing, and procurement. Where previously stores reported into admin and procurement reported into the CEO. But the head of procurement, his hands were tied because he really didn't have responsibility for the inventory. He didn't have visibility on the inventory. So we had a lot of emergency procurement going on, emergency because of stock outages. And so it was time consuming, and these stock outages then had an impact then on customer service and on profitability, because these emergency tenders were not buying product in the right volumes or at the lowest cost. So taking end-to-end responsibility, whether it's the front-end supply chain, the back-end supply chain, procurement, but the more responsibility, and I would say taking responsibility, that's sort of an aggressive statement if you just grab it, but you've got to show that you've got the willingness, the readiness, and the ability to manage that supply chain. And then being able to show that there's more value, because again, in the case of my client, we could clearly demonstrate by the inefficiencies of having supply chain and procurement report to different areas, the business problems that were incurred, how the customers were service was deteriorated, etc. So we had a business case. Next is proactively contributing to business issues beyond supply chain. So when you're sitting in these management meetings, when you have the opportunity, and in some cases supply chain is invited in, sometimes you're there, but it's not just sort of making a cameo appearance and adding value on supply chain. It's adding, we all know a lot more than supply chain. Look at any supply chain manager, and I ask you, in a lot of cases they promote how much spend they're managing, right? How much money are we looking after? Okay, how much money are you looking after? What's the value of the inventory you're looking after? How many companies are you managing? What are the collective number of employees in your total supply base that through your incentivizing remuneration, the total, the supply chain, when you look at the richness of it, about HR, right? You know about incentivization, you know about sales, you know about marketing, you know about sales, because the balance between selling it, if any procurement person out there has ever sold, you'll gain much greater appreciation being a salesperson than procurement. In procurement, I won't say it's easy, but selling is very difficult. So if you can actually see both sides of the coin, that will help. So there's a lot of value that supply chain can contribute to beyond supply chain, whether it's HR, whether it's IT, marketing, sales, etc. But step up and contribute is another way to be at the table. The one that everyone's familiar with is delivering tangible and measurable results. Now, these results need to be recognized and valued and needed by the business, because that's another thing we sometimes get into is procurement. And we'll say, we saved this much money, and the CFO, and I know some people are smiling out there, will say, I can't find it, right? And so it's actually helping the CFO define these measures, or making sure that these measures are ones that we talk about a shared vision and going, sort of directly side by side with your business owner, ones that will affect his business that show up in his or her P&L and KPIs as far as the businesses. And that's where you get more recognized, when you're actually delivering value that the businesses need to be successful. Number 5 here is developing a top-notch supply chain team of highly skilled professionals. There's 2 elements here. One is to be seen to develop a top-notch team is something that the CEO is always looking for. To have, to look at a team that, they know each other, they have complementary capabilities, they're talented, and they're working together effectively. That's what a manager and a leader needs to do. So being able to show that you can lead, develop, and lead your team, invest in your team, invest in yourself, and at the same time, you need this team to deliver. So, delegating, cascading responsibility, developing that top-notch team is quite important. And the last one here is, we talk about our Gallup strength-based coaching, but it is to have a keen self-awareness of your strengths, your weaknesses, and knowing how to make them both work for you. And so these are, this is through, I'm sure people have been through different counseling where, what color are you? There's red, green, blues, and there's colors or strength-based. But regardless of what methodology you're using, it's individually and collectively. Individually, yourself, knowing those strengths and weaknesses, and then how to make the most of them. And then collectively as a team, having the vulnerability to share that within a team, so the team can can work effectively as a team, they can depend on each other, and they better understand each other. So these are the 6 areas that I've tend to have found the characteristics of the supply chain executives that are at the table. So nowhere on here did I say you need to sort of take out the CEO. So that's not one of the methods here. So now I want to just jump into an area that in East Africa in particular, we're finding is delivering a lot of value. And again, number 4 here is deliver tangible, measurable results that are recognized and needed by the business. So one here, and I'm not sure, Rose, if there's a way we can see how many people have experience in Lean Six Sigma. But Lean Six Sigma, it's a technique that's been around for 40, 50 years. Started with Toyota in the automotive industry. But combining, what we're finding is combining Lean Six Sigma to supply chain problems and marrying it to digital are delivering some very significant short-term and medium-term results around, and if you look at Lean Six Sigma, what does it really mean? Well, Six Sigma is reducing variability. Lean is more about efficiency. So we can think of this in terms of a variety of areas. Think about delivery, right? In deliveries, you can have delivery performance that can be a day to a week, but widely variable, right? And so if you can consistently get it, this peak you see here around the high percentage of the deliveries being 6 hours, 7 hours, and then you want to shift it to 4, 3, 2. So Six Sigma is about reducing process variability. You're checking into a hotel, for example. How long does it take to check in? There may be a wide variability because of staffing and other reasons, but it's getting consistency. Airline schedule, right? Airlines, if there's an airline here, Precision Airlines. I always joke about precision because I'd rather than be accurate than precise. But consistently, at least if they were consistently early or consistently late, then you would shift that lateness to being on time. And if they're early and the slots aren't ready, then you could actually make them on time. On time is what you want. So consistently on time, not consistently early, not consistently late, but on time. So that's what Lean Six Sigma is about, is reducing variability and being consistent, achieving consistency. And Lean is about taking out non-value added activities. And any non-value added activity is something that does not add value to the customer. So inspection does not add value to the customer because they don't ask for it, and it should be built into the product. So there are a variety of things that do not create value to your customer. And that customer in terms of Lean could be an internal customer. If you're procurement, if you're supply chain, it could be your internal customer or business, or it could be the end customer. So we're looking at using Lean Six Sigma. And there's 4 methods. Simplification. You want to simplify. Take out unnecessary approvals. Take out unnecessary events that are adding time or effort to the supply chain. Standardize, having a standard way of working. Eliminating, taking out activities that in some cases, last week we were looking at, there's a certain action, a certain process that a client, activity in that process that the client was undertaking, and we asked the question, why do you do this? Do you have to do this? And they kind of looked around and they said, well, actually, it's a sacred cow in our organization, right? A sacred cow, and we're going to challenge that sacred cow. But it's eliminating things that may be there because before digital, there was a lot of manual paperwork, right? Manual processes. And I think a lot of it, what I see in East Africa, there's a struggle between these manual logbooks and handbooks, and pushing a button that says approved doesn't give someone the same satisfaction as signing on a piece of paper, right? And so we have manual paper as opposed to using or we have two processes. We have the ERP process, the automated workflow, and then we have the paper process, because there's still not a lot of confidence that pushing a button that says approved really means approved, and I can't find that button pressing somewhere. And then there's process automation. We see significant amounts of using ERP around workflow, using a lot of the apps that are available, automating processes. So there's 4 methods that we tend to use in Lean Six Sigma. Anyone who's worked with Lean Six Sigma, typically it's done through a process called DMAIAC: define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. And these are very simple methodology used globally, but within these there's a lot of rigor. that's used as far as defining the problem, measuring the baseline, because it's hard to improve unless you have a baseline. Fair amount of analysis that's done using specific statistical analysis, using analytics, then putting the change management in place, actually the improvement in place. And then controls, very important element of Lean Six Sigma is having the controls in place whereby you know when you're moving out of control. And also, in addition to control, continuous improvement. So once you reach one level, Lean is all about taking it to the next level and continually, while things are under control, finding continuous improvement. So I look at, we talk about value. I look at some of the areas where and this is in East Africa, where we're finding value in marrying together Lean and digital. Purchase to pay. The purchase to pay, I've worked with one client where we have moved from 88 days in paying an invoice, from invoice date to payment date, from 88 days to 20 to 25 days. The target was 30 days. Three-way matching. Three-way matching is that element where you have your goods receipt note and your invoice and your PO and matching them. There are technologies available today, and I think you may have covered this, Ben, in a previous webinar around just technologies that allow for digital paperless matching. But in some clients, we're still finding, the art of paper. This is a physical GRN that goes from a warehouse that could be miles away, that has to travel. The physical invoice needs to travel. The PO needs to travel to do a physical three-way match, right? So we're finding ways to digitize this. And even without digitizing, there are ways to improve the process whereby the success rate will improve. For example, data integrity in the system. If you have the wrong price in the system, you will not match. The wrong quantity, you will not match. So there's ways and processes in place, policies, procedures to improve that match rate that will then improve your purchase to pay. Revenue. One that's near and dear to my heart right now is the delivery of electricity services. And again, this is a big theme in East Africa, in Uganda, and Kenya, and Tanzania, with the rate of electrification. And I think Kenya may be 70% now. Tanzania is still around 50%. But electrification is an important issue from the government and for electricity providers for revenue. So we look at, I'm working with a client right now. Initially, it was 90 days between when a customer registered to when the electricity was turned on. And so here we did a lot of process mapping workshops, problem solving, analysis. And so a typical customer would walk into the office and register, visit one, would register and walk away and pay a registration fee, go into the system. And then there'd be a visit to the home, a phone call made to say the engineer's coming. Whether someone answered or not was secondary. The engineer would go do a survey, put together a quote, all this on paper, quote, send that paper in for a quote, and then there'd be a phone call made to the customer to say you can come in now and pay for your main registration fee. So the customer then needed, one, be available to answer the phone to know they needed to come in, two, make another visit to make the payment, and then the engineer would then go out and do the installation. After the installation, they would then fill out a piece of paper to say that it's been completed, take that paper back, and then someone would then need to rekey that information from one system, the SAP system, into the vending system so that you as a customer actually are vending and you need to be in the vending system. Otherwise, you can't buy electricity when you run out. So you could see a lot of the issues in this supply chain, right? We have material shortages. Now, we didn't need digital to solve the material shortages. One element of it was putting in place, as we said, merging together supply chain and procurement, improved planning to use the system for what it was defined for, SAP, so training around SAP. But one of the biggest wins we had here, and we find this in public sector, the ability to use it in public and private sector. I actually have 2 engagements right now around framework agreements. Framework agreements, I'm hoping a lot of you are using them already, but a framework agreement is, you tender a multi-year, it could be 1-year, multi-year agreement at specified prices. You could have a price formula, but it's a long-term agreement with the supplier whereby then you just make call-offs. Because with public procurement, a lot of you out there have to tender. So if you run out of material, you then need to tender, you need to advertise, you need to then post and tender, you need to go through the tender committee, you need to award, and the suppliers could change. The framework agreements have really allowed a transformation in terms of call-off blanket purchase orders or call-off agreements where it dramatically compresses the time. And that's if you need to regularly replenish. The planning side should allow you to not run out of stock. And this is where you see on the below the next line, typically the client would have 50 SKUs monthly, 50 SKUs with a shortage or an outage, stock outages. Now it's less than 5. So, that was one. Another one, as far as how to improve the customer connections, the delivery of electricity, was around mobile money, right? Mobile money was where the customer no longer needs to come in, right? And instead of coming in, you go online, you register, and you use mobile money. Another one was SMS. Instead of someone calling the customer to say, you can come in now and pay, or there's a survey that will be done at your house, we send SMS. It doesn't rely on someone having to be available to answer the phone to come in. So these are all, some of them you can see are digital. We had multiple visits, and we were able to reduce the number of visits to a customer as well with the survey team and the installation team. So there are techniques that organization, training, technology, different types of agreements. These are all a rich set of changes that were made to collapse that time from 90 days to 25 days. And then we get down to the control, where there's a standard KPI that's reviewed every month, because sometimes we'll see it slipping and we'll ask why it's slipping, to make sure that the process is in control. The last two, cost reduction, industrial cleaning services. This is, we had a client that they had an outside provider. It was a large processing company that had an outside cleaning service. And what we found is that the price for cleaning, similar cleaning, varied significantly. And so what we found, to enter this, to enter the chemical facility, it could take an hour, 2 hours, or immediate, depending on whether they had the permit to enter. So we had to work on having a pre-authorized entry permit. The crew size, of the crew, sometimes depending on where they came from, they'd have 4 people on a truck or 6 people on a truck. Well, the client was paying for whoever was on the truck, which moves us to a standard pricing model for a service. So instead of 6 hours, and that 6 hours could have been 4, it could have been 8, and the number of crew could have been 4 or 6. So we were able to have a standard pricing, and no matter who they sent, there was a price to be paid. And I've talked also the last one here about the marketing spend, events management. It's a very complex process, events management. So there we mapped it. We looked at how much was being spent with each provider. We looked at why were there so many last minute bookings that paid a premium on? Why were there certain flight arrangements that were made? How do we consolidate when people are traveling as a group to get group rates, et cetera? Booking venues and having negotiated discounts in place with venues in advance. So we looked at a variety of cost levers for events management, and we're able to take about 30% out there. And as I said, in this case, the money was shared. Some of it went to the CFO for savings, some of it went to the marketing team to do more marketing. So when we talk about Lean Six Sigma, you can see it has a wide range of applications in supply chain and procurement and supplier relationship management, a wide set of applications. Some of the areas here is when you get into processes, it's what you think it is. And a lot of people think they know what the process is. And anyone who's been in a process mapping workshop has seen what it actually is. And you have these hidden factories. And these hidden factories are paper that needs a driver. On some of our flow diagrams, we have a driver because a driver needs to go and collect a book or collect paperwork and drive it around. And there's hidden factories waiting for information, rekeying information, or just keying information that never should have been keyed in the first place. Authorizations and approvals that were in place before you had, for example, ERP systems, but they're still there because they weren't taken out when the ERP system was put in or when the process was changed. Old policies. So, we are a challenge. In this hidden factory, we find a lot of areas where the value is really surfaced. And then you see what you'd like the process to be. Very simple. Digital. We look at digital, and here we have, I think I've given a lot of these examples already around SMS integration. Using SMS, we use SMS to communicate with our business partners. We use them to communicate with customers and supply chain. Social media. We're using WhatsApp. We're seeing WhatsApp used for business purposes as well. As far as we've implemented a contact center for our electricity provider, and we have a WhatsApp, we have a Facebook, we have a phone system. So we have a variety of mechanisms to communicate using social media across the supply chain. Mobile apps, there are planning apps today for with mobile apps as far as if you have a field force out in vehicles, planning apps for that. We're using apps for ERP, for example, purchase orders. Although there's a delegation of authority with purchase orders to the CEO, what we've been able to do at one of our clients is the CEO now will go onto his computer or his phone, and he will then approve on the go, approve POs using his mobile phone. We talk about new customer connection. When the engineer goes to finish the installation, he will use the app and say work complete. When he hits work complete, it will update the system, which will then allow the vending system to be updated. As opposed to in the past, there was a book, a daily book that he'd keep, he'd take it in, and that information would get keyed into the system. If it was a Friday, it may not get keyed in until a Monday. And then there was someone else, once it's in the system, who needed to transfer to a different system. So these are some of the mobile apps that we see, powerful apps across sectors. Process automation, a lot of this is around workflow and ERP. One that we're finding quite valuable now, and it really is empowering, is GIS systems. So this map you see on the right-hand side is the electricity network of Zanzibar. Now, I can click on transformers, and I can see where my transformers are. I can see the date of installation of that transformer. I can see the age of the transformer. I can see who the suppliers of that transformer. So with these GIS systems, you can know where your assets are. You can then have attributes for your assets, year of purchase, year of installation, when it was maintained, et cetera. But this helps from a supply chain standpoint as far as serviceability, maintenance, procurement planning, and asset management. Asset management, you know where your assets are, and you have all the attributes for asset management all in your GIS system. And this, again, is one of our partners headquartered in Nairobi is Esri. They're a global company, but they're headquartered for East Africa. And we see a lot of activity right now with GIS and having customer service. So again, knowing where your customers are in the GIS system. If you have an outage, you know who's been affected by electricity outage in certain cases, and then using social media, you can update that particular group. Like when I think in some cases in banking, if an ATM goes down, you'll know that the ATM has gone down because you receive, and they may not say it's your ATM, they may say one in your area, but at least you're notified. We're starting to do that with the electricity provider when there's a planned outage. So digital being applied to remove waste. And as we get to closing, I'm sure I'm going into probably a bit too much depth here, but this is a typical workshop, right? These are the stakeholders. So we have what we call swim lanes, and that diagram in the back, that process flow. Each swim lane is an owner of that process, and they will all participate and talk about what they do. Because oftentimes when you get into a process mapping workshop, people actually don't know what the other function does. And it's only by sharing that you can come up with effective solutions. And in some cases, you'll have people emphatically saying how it actually happens, or people apologizing saying, I didn't really know I did this to you, right? And so these are the types of questions we ask when we go through these workshops. Where's paper used to take information or pass information? When are phone calls being made, requiring someone to answer the phone? Where's manual planning taken? When does the customer have to travel and why? How does the customer pay and where does the customer pay? Is there data entry or rekeying? I mean, the curse of lean, one of the big curses is manual paperwork. And we're trying to make things paperless. And we're actually using COVID as an excuse now to go paperless. We have 2 clients where we're deliberately pushing paperless processes with the intent of being more COVID safe and COVID compliant. We look at approvals, the nature of approvals. In some cases, there's approval upon approval upon approval, and we challenge why. And in some cases, it's historical. In some places, it's because of policy. So there's a lot of challenging that's done out of Lean Six Sigma. So I think in closing, Lean Six Sigma, we're finding it is highly applicable in East Africa, given the transition from paper to, I mean, a lot of people, we all know we still have to sign in on logbooks manually and give our ID just to go into an office. Now we're being asked, do you have a mask? And you sign in and you sanitize and everything else. But there's a very manual process involved in East Africa. We're trying to digitize it, and there are barriers to do that. Lean Six Sigma is participative. Again, we say all the process owners are involved. It's analytical. There's a lot of data involved. It's empowering, in that the people who are incurring the problems are responsible to some degree for fixing them. there's ownership because the people in these workshops own it. There's an opportunity for joint supplier and customer initiatives. We often we get the supplier in the room for these workshops because a supplier across the supply chain has a place in these processes. And then there's learning by doing. And a lot of employees find some value in their job by learning and not just transacting every day. And then in some cases, we're finding that we can liberate people from transactional activities to move into higher value added decision support activity or higher value add activities. Now, the only, I'd say caveat here is management, the company culture, the supplier relations need to be supportive of such a process. Because management's going to need to walk the talk. If these are the changes that have been agreed, then they're going to have to shepherd them and see them through. The company culture needs to be open. If it's too hierarchical, it's very difficult for Lean Six Sigma to work in a very hierarchical structure. And the supplier relationships need to be such that, in supplier relationships, you ask the question, does the supplier need us and do we need them? Because in some cases, if the supplier doesn't really need you, if you're not important to them, then that's difficult to do. So you need to be important to the supplier and the supplier needs to be important to you, but have mutuality there for this to work. So I think we've covered a lot of terrain as far as COVID response, as far as getting to the C-suite, and as far as value creation using digital Lean Six Sigma. So at this point, would like to just open it up, Rose and Bernard, to the audience.
Thank you very much, Max. Very insightful, very practical. I see questions already coming in. I would like to start the Q&A with just taking you back on the C-suite consideration areas on point number 4, where you say deliver tangible, measurable results, value that are recognizable and needed by the business. So 2 things stand out for me there, and I would like you to explain to us with some examples of those, maybe 3 or 4 deliverables. That what are they? How do we get them recognized, and how do we ensure they are actually needed by the business?
Right. So here, you go back to the strategic plan. Normally, the business units have their own strategic plan. Those strategic plans will have actions, and they'll have KPIs and metrics around them. They may be in line with standard KPIs that a company uses, or specific to product introduction, right? Having products sent to, arriving and marketed, new products going to market. Could be around restructuring your supply base. And then there's financial and non-financial. I think those are the 2 big things. Financial and non-financial measure of performance, or financial and non-financial KPIs. Because the non-financial are the KPIs that actually create the financial results. So non-financial, if you're going to shift your supply base to a low-cost country, and you're going to move X% of your supply to a low-cost country, getting X to Y will, once you get X to Y, the numbers will change as far as the financial results. But if I never move X to Y, you can't expect the results to happen. So an important one is, as you get into the strategic plans, making sure that you do have non-financial measures of performance that will measure the process or the change, so that the change happens and it happens in a timely fashion. Now, if I'm supposed to move 40% of my spend to a strategic supplier and I move 30%, okay, that's one aspect that, that affects the numbers, but at least I've moved it, but in a timely fashion. So there's time and there's magnitude as you get into the strategic plans of the business. So I think, Ben, I'd say that is what I largely look at is, and with the business, in some cases, you may need to challenge the executive if you don't think those metrics are right. But it's not for supply chain to go on their own to the, to the CEO and say, look, I think these metrics are a bit screwed up for business A. You need to go lock and step with the business owner and have these discussions around, you all are part of the management team. So these are rich discussions that you need to have in terms of, are these the right metrics to be used?
Great. We have a question from Virginia. She has many questions, and she has a bachelor's degree in supply chain management. She would like to go back to school for a master's degree. She currently works at a telecommunication company And from her observation, all the people who matter within the supply chain department are all engineers. Then she asked another one. I want to combine these two. And she says, what is the
What's
place?
wrong with that?
Then she says,
Sorry.
and you know you're an engineer. Then she says, she asked, what is the place of technical specialization as far as being that value-adding supply chain specialist is concerned?
Yes.
I am a bit hesitant about doing another supply chain degree. So those are two questions almost related from Virginia Mutola. How would you respond to her?
Well, I can appreciate, and I think this is one of the points we make around the C-suite is being rounded, because you can be a sharp tool, and the sharper you get, and your skills become very sharp. You become almost a single purpose. You're seen as a single purpose tool or capability in an organization. Well, everyone will come to you for that skill, but they don't know you for outside of that skill. So I'm not doing any career counseling here as far as where you should go back to university and what degree you should get next. But culturally, in some organizations, there's certain degrees that are recognized. In countries, there are certain degrees. In Italy, I went there. I was a consultant. My name was Mr. Simmons, and then when they found out I was an engineer, I became Ingegnere Simmons, right? Because engineering is very valued there. So part of this may be culture, and that may be hard to change, but it may change over time. Part of it may be how round you are, as opposed to how narrow and sharp you might be. So, but some people like to be narrow and sharp, right? That's what they choose to be. So part of this is also your choices of what you want to be in your career. And it sounds like you're having the right kinds of questions you're asking yourself.
Great. So we have from Duke Kena. So are technical skills more important than social and emotional intelligence when it comes to C-suite considerations?
Okay, I think this is a loaded question, isn't it? In the C-suite, it's about leadership, right? And leadership, you need a base of technical skills, but increasingly in the C-suite, it is about the ability to lead. And we see in supply chain, you're leading your team, you're leading a vast supply chain of organizations. So the minimum requirement is to be very, very good at supply chain, right? Because it's going to be tough to get in the C-suite otherwise. But you're going to have, as I said, at item number six, the self-awareness, right? The leadership skills. Those are, I'd say, 50-50 by the time you get to the C-suite, is to make sure that you are a rounded executive who is a people manager and a people leader, and a team player. Are all those things that are going to be required, in addition to being, the sharpest supply chain professional.
Great. Then we have an anonymous attendee is asking, what is the relationship between Lean Six Sigma and total quality management in supply chain?
Total quality and Lean Six Sigma. In a way that they go hand in hand. Total quality I'd say is pervasive. When we look at total quality, it's looking at everyone's, total quality in every job, total quality in every aspect of a business. Meaning, if you're in the sales department, if you're in the purchasing department, it's total quality. Whether you're in housekeeping in a hotel, there's total quality in everything you do, and that's also a mentality. So total quality is about having excellence and quality throughout a company, not just in the product. I think a lot of people think of quality in terms of the service, whatever a company takes to market. If it's a service, having a quality service. If it's a product, having a quality product. But total quality is much more around quality in every function of the business and every process of the business. And which goes hand in hand with Lean Six Sigma, but Lean Six Sigma is heavily, it achieves quality. It's a mentality of continuous improvement. So they're similar, but I'd say the total quality is around total quality in everything that you're doing, and it's a mentality of taking out all of the steps that you see that have no relevance or poor quality and errors. So they're very similar, but I'd say the total quality is much less around process, and it could be around function, it could be around a job, where Lean Six Sigma is very much around processes.
Great. We have two questions, let me say 2.5, from Alex Musungu and Kenneth Sang. So Alex is asking if supply chain should focus on the company's vision and mission. So I think that goes on just somehow re-emphasizing or breaking down point number 1 of shared vision with their business. So that will be question number 1. And question number 2, which is combined with what Kenneth Sang has asked, is around digital transformation, where Alex is asking how can governments around the world be convinced away from paperwork to being digital. Auditors want to see paperwork. And Kenneth Sang in another angle says, what is the motivation required to ensure supply chain departments go to full digitization in East Africa? So more or less in the same angle.
Okay, the first one, I think, purpose and mission. Clearly, I think it's back to the C-suite. It's the goal of the C-suite to make sure that every employee understands the mission and the purpose and the vision, and all your trading partners as well understand the mission and purpose. So that comes out of the C-suite, and it'd be curious, even on this webinar, if people reflect on to what extent do I know the mission and vision of the company I'm working for. So the answer to that question is yes. It's important that it's important that your supply chain partners understand, your external partners also understand your mission and purpose and vision, because it's only with that alignment with your strategic partners and your strategic suppliers, if they don't understand that, it's hard for them to add value into your business. Right, so digitization, why do digitization? I'm dealing with government at the same time right now. I'm dealing with a government entity, and I'm dealing with the private sector, and we're digitizing. And what we're finding in the public sector, it really is around consistency of working and errors, and again, governments are accountable for their own budgets, right? And governments, we're looking now at and you look at COVID, and you look at the pressure that's going to be on governments around being efficient and how they spend their money. So I think one is, within the government framework, efficiency is becoming increasingly important, right? We see time and time again the procurement process in government. The procurement process can be so confining that you actually are spending more money than you would have spent otherwise. And it's trying to get through to demonstrate the value of the prize and the opportunity with small steps. I'd say small steps are one thing you can work on to see through. There are promises made in government. The question is, how committed is the government to those promises and seeing those promises through, which is a much bigger issue than really for this webinar. Full digitization. Let's start with half. Start the journey. And I think it then becomes, this is back to lean, and we talk about continuous improvement. Once you start the journey, it then becomes contagious. Once you start, for example, the lean mentality, Lean Six Sigma mentality, people expect to now go to the next level and the next level as well. So I would start for driving for some digitization and then continuing the journey. Aside from starting, it's a journey, right? It's not a destination. Digitization is very much the journey. So there really will never be full digitization because there'll always be something new coming along. So lay a roadmap and a vision, start the journey, and then continue along the way. And the journey will change. The roadmap will change as technology and conditions change. But digitization is not a destination.
Great. So the other, I don't know if Austin Kitinya is there. If you can unmute yourself, I said I will welcome you and you can ask your question. Austin, if you could unmute yourself, then you could ask your question. Okay, it seems we can't get hosted. So I guess I'll probably ask the last question as we close the webinar, in that going back to, or returning back to work, there's going to be a lot of pressure in supply chain teams as organizations try to recover revenues, sales volumes, return to profitability, and conserve and generate cash, and at the same time maintain a good relationship and not choke their suppliers. What are some of the top 3 or top 5 performance areas or objectives you would advise generally supply chain teams, from managers to directors, to set for their functions as targets, as things that will matter to the CC, to the board, and to the business?
Okay. I think the first element is, okay, an objective or an outcome would be to have a COVID response plan, right? To actually, the objective would be to put together what kind of value do we think we can deliver over time, short-term, medium-term value, through what initiatives or what levers. That for COVID response. So again, we say about number 4 here is delivering value. Number 2 is willing and ready to step up to more responsibility. Is proactively having in mind creating that plan. Now, how to do that? I would engage with my those of you in procurement or supply chain may know the Kogelik matrix. It's strategic, leverage, bottleneck, and I forget the last one, Bernard, but getting with your strategic partners, your strategic suppliers, those that you spend a lot of money on, that you have a mutual relationship with, importance to the supplier, importance to yourselves. Spend time with your partners, spend time with your business leaders, spend time with your people. And I think that richness of, what they say about a team, right? In terms of, the more you can never create on your own, but you can create by participation. So I would reach out to your key strategic partners, your business, your people, benchmark what other companies are doing, and structure a plan that consists of both the initiatives and the targets that you expect to come out of it. And then getting the commitment of your business partners, commitments of your supply base, once you can run that through the executive, and get the go-ahead. I guess my point has been, I wouldn't wait to be asked for the plan, right?
Okay, so what you are saying is that where we are sitting as a procurement professional, and this is also going to answer a question that someone had just asked called mediacy, on what disqualifies us from having a seat at the table, is that we should be having a plan right now around our COVID response on areas that has been impacted, on revenue, how we will help the business contribute on revenue, on cost, on cash, on supplier relationship, on liquidity, including extending liquidity for our suppliers. So all you're telling the team here and the audience is that they should be having a plan developed or developing already.
Yes.
With them, benchmarked with their peers, collaborate, form sort of a group, sort of discourse with this working from home, and have something already submitted or to submit or ready to go.
Yes, and also, given it's COVID-19, all those things you laid out, Ben, are clearly part of this plan. But at the same time, it needs to be a plan that is COVID compliant, right? That protects your customers, it protects your people, it protects your suppliers. So underlying all this is also a true COVID hygiene, COVID protection plan as well.
Great. So I think we will close it at that point. So Mark, before I close, any last words, last comments, last encouragements?
I think, clearly for supply chain, and they're uncertain times, but exciting times. And I think there's an opportunity here to really demonstrate the value. I think on a personal note, it's something that I've throughout my career, I've just advised my team on is investing in yourselves, right? And this is, it's just on a personal note, depending on, you can work for whoever you work for, but what defines everyone are your capabilities, right? No one can take those capabilities away from you. No matter where you are, what company you work for, that investment is something that you will hold for your career. So I would just encourage people to continue to invest in yourselves and take on the capabilities that you need for the journey that you'd like to go on. And this is, the comment that came through earlier was, I'm not sure I want to be a sharp supply chain tool focused specialist, and I may want to be broader, right? So make sure that you take the time to invest in yourself, because in some cases, your employer may or may not. And this is when you may need to step up and ask for it or demand it, but always make sure that, that you're investing in yourselves.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending this webinar, as always. Look forward to the next one, the next week, same time, same day, Friday. I think my last comments would be that we should be ready, as you are saying, about COVID compliant plan. On the last 2 or 3 weeks, actually 1 month, we've received a lot of sourcing projects, purely sourcing projects on return to office, which include workplace distancing. Fortunately or unfortunately, I will say fortunately for me and for us, because we are doing those sourcing, is that a lot of procurement teams and supply chain teams are not prepared on going back to work with the COVID awareness of COVID reality. For example, how are you going to receive goods? How are your suppliers going to come to deliver the goods, and what kind in the warehouse? What is going to happen in the warehouse? How about your workstations? How about your bathrooms? How about your canteens? Are you going to put shield guards? So these are plans that already procurement people should have been thinking about, should have some suppliers in mind, some prices in mind, some discussion with facility managers, some discussion with the HR manager, so that even if the board, the ExCom, or whoever is making the decision hasn't decided, when they decide, you be ready. Because if the CEO is in London, or the CEO is in the public sector, has just met the minutes and they decide we are going back tomorrow, but we need automatic hand sanitizers, we need the dispenser, we need disinfectant mats and all these things. We need a COVID compliant workplace, warehouse, or factory. You should be ready for it. This will be my last words. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much, Mark. And a lot of people are asking for the slides. I'm sure we'll share with them, including the recording once it is edited. So, and a lot of people, when you get the slides, you should be able to also reach out directly to Mark, ask him for support, engage with this team. We work together very closely with Mark around the region, and we hope to be able to support you to achieve your goals and get that seat on the table. See you next week, same time, same day, Friday, 6 p.m. Have a good night, have a blessed weekend, and God bless.